If you're terrified of wasting your life, I have a warning. Without understanding some critical things I'm about to explain, trusting the internet for guidance could sabotage your decisions, not make them better.
Our distractibility means we're agnostic on the question of what to value.
This is René Girard. He came up with a theory called mimetic desire, basically claiming that everything people want is just learnt by copying those around them.
Everything we want is imitation of other people's wants. We don't have any original wants.
Yuval Noah Harari agrees. We actually pick our dreams much like we pick the food in a hotel buffet, that is, from a very limited menu of what's available and not yet dried out. Even our most personal desires are programmed, he says. A wealthy man in ancient Egypt would never have dreamed of solving a relationship crisis by taking his wife on a holiday. Instead, he might have built her the sumptuous tomb she wanted. Every person is born into a pre-existing imagined order, and even our most personal desires are shaped from birth by its dominant myths. And with so much time being spent online nowadays, I wanted to see how much screen time was changing what we want from life. This 2019 poll of 8 to 12-year-olds' dream jobs shows two things. First, the number one choice of YouTuber didn't even exist when I was a child, and two, maybe my career aspirations show I haven't grown up as much as I thought. But the thing is, if we're all just running around copying other people's goals, is it any surprise we'll get bored and end up procrastinating? Surely there's something more substantial we can rely on for long-term motivation. Edward Deasy and Richard Ryan set out to answer this question way back in the 1980s. Around that time, Wall Street banks were confused why, contrary to everyone's assumptions, throwing more and more money at their employees was not increasing their productivity. Deasy and Ryan conducted an experiment where half of a group of participants were paid to solve puzzles while the other half did it for free. They found that the people who weren't paid stayed motivated for longer and actually even played with the puzzles during their breaks. Throughout their body of work, they concluded that long-term, people are motivated by inner satisfaction much more than external rewards like cash. Specifically, they found people have three basic needs: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Any career that meets these requirements has a decent chance of being satisfying, regardless of the specific work being done. But in reality, life is not always rewarding in this way, which is where digital distractions come in. For example, social media quenches our thirst for relating to others with less effort and risk than leaving the house. Games usually have short and achievable goals which are much easier to master than the mess of real life. And if, like me, you're up late stuffing your brain with endless education because you work in a call center, then maybe it's the autonomy you're missing.
We could think of all of these little technologies as mood modulators. If we want to kind of get away from whatever anxiety we're feeling and engage in some kind of movement, we have these ready at hand.
And while it's great we have more choice than ever over what we do with our time and attention, be honest, does the idea of finding your purpose amidst a sea of distraction always fill you with excitement? Or can it also feel like a burden you'd like to escape sometimes? Who's really to blame here? Whenever I waste away a morning online, I'm mostly angry with myself, not with the platforms or the creators. This sheepishness drives some of the popularity of personal responsibility teachers like Jordan Peterson, Goggins, or Willink, who say the buck still stops with you despite any spell of distraction the wizard of Reddit or the Twitch witch has cast.
You need to take responsibility for what happens around you.
Ultimate responsibility is all on you.
But the seed of this idea was planted long before the internet was even conceived. Descartes is most famous for his phrase, "I think therefore I am," cleaving the mind from its dependence on the body in the outside world. Around 200 years later, Immanuel Kant built on this with the goal that humans should attain individual will uninfluenced by others or the environment. This becomes the scapegoat for creators and platforms who fall back on ideals of individual will to avoid taking responsibility for shepherding our attention with simple human desires for sex, status, and belonging. Addiction expert Natasha Shull writes, "The industry assumes an autonomous subject capable of acting in his own self-interest. Meanwhile, every aspect of the experience is engineered to induce people to continue until they have nothing left." To illustrate that what we click is sometimes nothing to do with what we want, here's technology ethicist Tristan Harris.
According to that logic, when you drive down the freeway in California and everyone's attention is looking at the car crash, because according to the logic of Facebook and Google, the world wants car crashes. They don't want it, but if you just look at their field preferences and their behavior, they want the car crashes.
Do you think platforms should be regulated to avoid capturing our attention?
Regulation has to be changed in a much more general scale. Why don't we try to build some kind of safety modification?
But in the meantime, taking personal responsibility is the more practical solution. I love to carefully research my decisions, and it's not just me. A friend recently confided he took 2 weeks to research buying a new frying pan.
I've done all my research, I conducted an informal poll, and I've arrived at the rock-solid certainty I've made the right choice.
The internet lets us research theoretically forever, but does all this information make it easier or actually harder to come to a choice?
Distractibility could be regarded as the mental equivalent of obesity.
Education is considered universally virtuous, and for that reason, the side of the internet that deals with knowledge doesn't come under the same scrutiny as, say, video games or social media. But perhaps it should.
Human experience has become a highly engineered thing.
But at a certain point, information is addictive and we run after it. It paralyzes you and it doesn't allow you to apply and learn.
So is there a point where learning more and more hurts us more than it helps? And if so, how do we know when that is? In 2013, neuroscientist Ming Hsu created an experiment where participants could win money by playing a game. During play, they could try to help their odds by buying hints, but only some of these hints were helpful and others were irrelevant. When the stakes were low, people generally made logical decisions. However, as winnings and losses rose, people began to irrationally purchase hints, regardless of whether or not they improved gameplay decisions. fMRI scans given to participants during play showed that the areas of the brain responding to information are exactly the same that react to food, money, and all the things that hit us with the infamous motivation hormone dopamine. He concluded, just as our brains like empty calories from junk food, they crave information that makes us feel good even when it isn't useful. The desire to acquire knowledge beyond what's actually relevant could be an expression of the same basic insecurity that drives people to hoard anything, from money to plastic bags. And a few hundred years back, this strategy would have made total sense. Our ancestors didn't have internet, so anything they could learn would be locally relevant and useful. So like we are with fast food, we should be aware the education industry, from podcasts to courses, has the same power to hijack our evolved curiosity. As discussed in our previous video, attention is the hard currency online, and information is another one of the goods and services being sold. But how much information is necessary to make a good decision? The CIA was very interested in this question, so they commissioned a paper in 1999 by Richard J. Hewer. He references a study of 8 professional horse racing pundits who were asked to guess the results of past races they hadn't seen by choosing any 5 stats they wanted about the horses involved. Then they were allowed to choose another 5, 10, and 20 data points, and each time they could update their predictions if they wanted. However, only 2 of the 8 improved their predictions as the amount of information they had increased. 3 were unchanged, but 3 became worse and worse. Most worryingly though, all 8 became more and more confident in their decisions as the data they had access to piled up. This is called the information load paradigm. The report concluded, once a person has the minimum information necessary to make an informed judgment, obtaining additional information generally does not improve the accuracy and can even hurt his or her estimates. In other words, once you know what you need to know, stop researching and just make up your mind. If you're researching something, say like a new frying pan purchase, it's probably best to decide as early as possible what the 5 most important features are to you and limit your research only to those things. It's very likely that any further information isn't going to help and could even hurt your decision making. Speaking of which, how do you make good decisions? Say you go to a restaurant. Do you always order the same cheeseburger and Coke, or do you try something different every time?
Bacon, scones, a Welsh rabbit.
In decision-making science, this is called the explore-exploit dilemma.
You have to make a decision about whether you're going to try something new or whether you're going to go to a place that you already know is pretty good. The first question is how much longer you're going to be in town. If you're just going to be there for a short time, just go to a place you already know is good. But if you're going to be there for a longer time, try something new, because the information you get is something that can improve your choices in the future.
Alright, so you do decide to take a chance and order something new. There are actually 2 sub-strategies you can use. For example, if you know you like buns and meat, you could use this prior experience and say, try the pulled pork sandwich. If it stinks, no big deal, you've gained some more experience and knowledge of your tastes for next time. This strategy of trial, error, and iteration is called directed exploration. But there's a second strategy called general exploration, which basically means picking at random.
Come on, hot fudge sundae. Come on, hot fudge sundae.
And while this seems crazy, it has 2 potential advantages. Firstly, it's often much quicker to make a guess than it is to deliberate. So when circumstances are changing or you're under pressure to make a quick decision, general exploration can work quite well. Secondly, while drawing on experience does tend to improve your decisions, it also tends to narrow them down over time. General exploration is the only way to find the unknown unknowns, which can contain both new opportunities and reveal hidden dangers. So in most situations, some combination of general exploration, directed exploration, and exploitation is going to be best. Alright, so far so good, but as someone who struggles with compulsive learning and internet use, I wanted to know if there was any difference in the way addicts and non-addicts handle information and make decisions. In 2016, L.S. Morris created this experiment. Participants were shown a wheel divided into separate sections that each held a hidden monetary value. On each of the wheel's rotations, they could stop it on any section to uncover and win the amount of money that was hidden there. Next spin, they could either stop at the same place to win the same amount, or try a new location. Of the participants, smokers were the most exploratory, perhaps because of the dopaminergic effects of nicotine. Binge eaters showed no difference to the control group, and alcoholics were the least exploratory. But the big surprise came in the second round. The numbers were reset and the game was played again, with each monetary amount being deducted instead of won. This time, all the addicts became extremely risk-averse and were far less likely to explore the full face of the wheel, even when they were losing significant amounts of money on their current decisions. Maybe this is what addiction is: repeating a behavior, even a damaging one, for fear that any alternative will lead to an even worse outcome. I always thought that being curious and into general knowledge made me more adventurous, but neuroscientist Jacqueline Gottlieb disagrees. Paraphrasing a 2013 paper, "General information seeking is defensive and about reducing uncertainty. Human curiosity probably evolved more to uncover and avoid danger than to discover new opportunities." So there are two conclusions here. One, addict habits are not just limited to their favorite substances or behaviors, but become a blueprint for how they make all decisions. And two, while we think of addiction as an irrational sickness, as we've seen, repetitive and erratic choices are actually a perfectly logical way of dealing with stress and instability.
It's a strategy for survival. You find something that works, in my case for managing my emotional state, and then you keep doing it.
You can often spot someone who's mentally healthy because they'll usually make small, gradual, considered changes to their life rather than big or erratic ones. But for those of us who aren't quite there yet, let's take a look at how social media can make this problem even worse.
Every technology solves a problem and it creates a problem.
Even though there are these great technologies to help block distractions online, without addressing the underlying cause, I found my propensity to piss around often creeps back over time. Often it comes down to disconnection from one of Edward L. Deci and Richard Ryan's three motivations: autonomy, relatedness, or mastery. But what's really necessary to feel good? Mathew Crawford writes, "Joy is the feeling of your power increasing. We achieve competence by becoming sensitive to the patterns by which the flux of central data reveals a stable world." And that last line seems true, because whenever I feel unstable in my work or relationships, no amount of nootropics or chill beats to relax and study to seems to help me chill, relax, or study. Put another way, after a nice cozy evening with friends, I'm less likely to be up at 4 AM checking if my ex-girlfriend's unprivated their Instagram page. Are there any chemicals our body releases when we feel safe?
Oxytocin is the hormone that's involved in human pair bonding, and it directly links and causes the release of dopamine. So when we connect with other humans, especially in a transcendent spiritual way, that's a huge dopamine hit.
Studies of kids have shown that there's a correlation between low oxytocin in boys and their self-control. Serum oxytocin levels were found to be significantly lower in boys with ADHD. So healthy oxytocin levels seem to signal to the brain that it's safe to relax and focus. As for how, getting a cat or a dog might help. This study found that serum oxytocin increased in both the human and the animal for about 5 to 24 minutes after a petting session. If you're affected by any of the issues raised in this video and would like more help, check out the links in the description. Thanks for your time.